The funding section on the system can be found by clicking on the funding icon at the top of any page. Prior to using the funding section, there are a number of settings that must be set up on the system before being able to see the funded children on the system. Firstly, place your mouse over the accounts icon and click on General Setup. You will now be taken to the General Setup page, where you can set up your general settings for the account section. This includes some basic information, for example, contact information, working hours per week, the payment options you select, the contracted hourly rates, half-day full rates, before and after school rates, session rates, the ability to apply all those rates to the children on the system, and finally the childcare funding rates. If you accept childcare funding in the setting, ensure you tick this box and then select the rate that you receive for 2-year-olds and 3 and 4-year-olds. Here we can see £4 an hour for 2-year-olds, £5 for 3 and 4-year-olds, and the EYPP Early Years Pupil Premium rate is £2. For additional help when setting up your general settings for the accounts section, click on the video icon shown here, scroll to the top of the page, and watch the accounts general setup video shown here. In addition, there is a help tour here that explains how to set up this section. Once you have entered your funding rates, scroll to the bottom of the page and click the Save button. You will now be taken to the Children's Setup and Invoicing section, where you need to set up each individual child to state that they receive funding. Here for Harry, we click on the Setup icon. You will be taken to Harry's settings. Select whether they receive weekly, monthly, or termly invoices, and then scroll down to the childcare funding section and tick the box to indicate that you receive funding for the child. Once you have stated that you receive funding for Harry, scroll to the bottom of the page and click on the Save button. This process can be repeated for each child, editing their invoice settings. Once you have done this, you can create invoices for the children. For Harry, we will now complete one of his weekly invoices by clicking on the 7 icon shown here. We will now create an invoice for January week 1, January 2024 for Harry. We click on the plus icon to create the invoice. At the top of the page, we can see we have a rate calculation for Harry's weekly invoice. The total hours for this invoice are 45. We have 15 hours at £4 an hour totaling £60, and we have 30 funded hours for the week. Here we can see for the week, Monday through to Sunday, we have Session 1 and Session 2 for each day. Session 1 from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. is funded. Likewise for Tuesday through to Friday, the 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. hours that the child attends the setting, they have been set up as funded. We then have a Session 2 for each day. This is from 3 p.m. until 6 p.m. and the rate calculation is at £4 per hour. This is 3 hours a day for 5 days totaling 15 hours, and the 15 hours at £4 an hour is £60. For the meal information, we do not charge for meals, therefore no charges are displayed. And then scrolling down we can see a breakdown on the invoice for the contracted care for Harry. £60 charge. Funded hours total 30 hours with a 0 charge. Childcare vouchers, meals, and additional charges are also displayed with a 0 charge. When the parent views the invoice, funded hours will show as a 0 charge to the parents. If we now scroll down, we can mark that the invoice is complete and click on the Save button. You will now see here for week 1 for Harry, we have an invoice valued at £60. It is complete and it is currently unpaid. If we return to the Invoicing Overview section, we will now see we have an invoice for Harry of £60. We're now going to proceed and create an invoice for Jamie, who has his invoices created monthly. We're going to click on the 12 icon to create the invoice. We're going to create an invoice in January 2024. We click on the plus icon. Jamie's invoices are created on a fixed monthly rate calculation. Here we can see we have a total for the fixed rate of £185, and for the month we have a total of 150 hours of funding. We can now see a breakdown of the invoice for January 2024. On Mondays, we can see that he arrives at 7 a.m. and leaves at 6 p.m., and for each of those sessions it is funded. Likewise for Tuesday from 7 till 7, and Wednesday from 7 till 2, all of those days the rate is set as funded. On Thursdays he arrives at 8 a.m. and leaves at 5 p.m, and on Fridays he arrives at 7 a.m. and leaves at 4 p.m. Those hours are charged within the fixed rate shown here of £185. If you wanted to add additional hours to any of those days, you can do so by clicking on the edit icon and entering the times that he arrived and left within session 2. For example, if he arrived at 5 and departed at 7 p.m, we could state that this was charged at a rate of £4 and click on the tick. You will now see that he arrived at 8 and left at 5, and then had an extra 2 hours from 5 until 7 at a rate of £4. If we scroll up, we can now see we have 2 hours at a rate of £4, totaling £8. If we now scroll down to the bottom of the invoice, you will see here we have the charges of £193, 150 hours at £0. We're now going to scroll to the bottom of the page, mark the invoice as complete, and click on Save. You will now see for January, we have an invoice for £193 and it is currently unpaid. If we now go back to the invoice overview page, we will finally create an invoice for Lisa Marie, who has her invoices created on a termly basis. We click on the 3 termly icon, and we now select the winter term that we would like to create the invoice for, by clicking on the add icon. Lisa has her invoices created on a termly basis for a fixed rate. The fixed rate is £1,355. The funding hours for the termly period is 370 hours. For her invoice, we can see a breakdown of 3 months, January, February, and March. For each day within the month, you will see whether the hours that she attends are funded or on the fixed rate. Here we can see for Thursday, she arrives at 9 and leaves at 2, and that's included within her funded rate. For session 2, from 2 till 7, that's included within her fixed rate. You will see the breakdown for each day of the 3 months within the termly period. If we scroll to the bottom of the page, you will see she has the contracted childcare charges of £1,355 and 370 hours of funding at 0. We will now mark this invoice as complete and save the page. You will now see she has an invoice created for this termly period of £1,355, and it's currently unpaid. If we now go to the funding section by clicking on the funding icon, you will see the 3 children, with their 3 invoices created for the January period. Harry, who has his invoices created on a weekly basis, Jamie has his invoices created on a monthly basis, and Lisa has her invoices created on a termly basis. If we click on the view icon for Harry, you will see now that we have a funded hours overview for Harry for 2024. For January he has 30 hours with a value of £120. And currently, the status is not submitted for the funded hours. If we click on the Manage icon and click on View, we will see a session breakdown for Harry's funded hours for January 2024. Here we can see Monday through to Friday we have 6 hours at £4 for each of the 5 days, totaling £24 a day. If we now go back to the Funded Children section, and view Jamie, who has his invoices created on a monthly basis, we can see for January 2024, he has 150 hours with a value of £600. Likewise, they have not been submitted. We click on the Manage icon and click on View. You will see on this page we have funded hours for Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday for each day of the month. 11 hours at £4 an hour, totaling £44 for Mondays. Tuesdays is £48, and Wednesdays is £28. If we now return to the overview page, and view the funding for Lisa Marie. As her invoices were created on a termly basis, the 3 months within the term are displayed, January, February, and March. If we click on the view icon for January, you will see a breakdown of the funding for each day within January. Session 1, 10 hours at £5 an hour, equaling £50, and you also receive the EYPP payment of 10 hours, at £2 totaling £20. If we go back and view the funding for Harry, you will see that the funding has not been submitted to the local authority. If you have now submitted the payment to the local authority, you can click on the Not Submitted button to change it to Submitted. Once you have received payment for Harry's funded hours, you can click on Submitted to change it to Paid. If we now go back to the Funded Children section, you will see for Harry, the January invoices now displays with a green border, indicating that they have been paid. We are now going to jump to the Monthly Income section. To do this, place your mouse over the income icon, and click on Monthly Income. You'll now see a breakdown of your monthly income and expenditure for January 2024. Here we can see within the breakdown we have an All Invoices section, and an All Funding section. You can now see that we have £1,608 of unpaid invoices for January, and we have unpaid funding of £1,250 for January. We also have a paid £120 of funding for January. This gives us a breakdown down here, payments received and projected income. We can now scroll down to the funding section within the monthly income page, and we can see the 3 invoices that were created within January for the children on the system. Harry, for £120, you have indicated that you have received that payment, and for Jamie and Lisa, we have not submitted those yet to the council. If you have now been paid for the funding for January for the other 2 children, you can either click here on the Not Submitted icon and change to Paid, or you can select the 2 children and select the Mark Selected Funded Hours as Paid, and click on the Submit button. The system will instantly mark those funded invoices as paid. If we now jump to the Yearly Income page by placing your mouse over Income, and clicking on Yearly Income, here we can see a breakdown for 2024. We have the All Invoices section and the All Funding section. Here we can see again for invoices we have £1,608 unpaid, and for funding we can see that we have £1,370 paid for January, and for February and March this shows the 2 invoices for Lisa, who had a termly invoice created for her. These are still currently unpaid. To use the funding section correctly on the system, you must ensure you set up your account's general setup correctly, and you must also set up each individual child's settings correctly. Once you have done this, you can then proceed to create the funded invoices for the children on the system.